The courtroom was too bright. Light gathered on the polished wood and climbed the walls in slow, deliberate lines. It made everything look clean, controlled, as if truth could be bleached into submission by overhead lamps. I stood at the defense table in my dress uniform, shoulders aligned, chin level, hands resting lightly against the edge of the oak surface. My pulse was steady. Years of command had trained it that way. Emotion does not belong in rooms designed to measure credibility. 3 weeks earlier, I had taken the oath as commander. Today, I was being called a liar. Across the aisle, the prosecutor adjusted his cuffs with theatrical patience. He was a man who enjoyed silence because he believed it bent toward him. When he spoke, his voice carried just enough warmth to appear reasonable. "Commander Amelia Vance," he said, turning slightly so the gallery could observe his restraint. "Your project, Silent Sentinel, does not exist." He paused, then added with precision, "It is a fabrication." The words settled into the air like fine dust. A reporter shifted in the second row. Pens resumed movement. I did not move. Behind me, separated by a low wooden barrier, my family sat close together. My mother's gloved hand rested on my father's arm. My brother leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching me as if waiting for a spectacle. My mother caught my eye. Her expression was not anger, it was fear. The judge folded his hands. "Commander Vance, the prosecution alleges that Silent Sentinel was cited to justify unauthorized allocations of federal resources. You have not provided documentation verifying its existence. How do you respond?" I kept my voice even. "The operation is classified, Your Honor." A murmur drifted through the courtroom. The prosecutor smiled slightly. "Classified operations leave classified traces, budget approvals, oversight logs, interagency acknowledgments. We have found none." He stepped forward. "Commander Vance, your silence is beginning to resemble admission." Silence. I had built an entire career around disciplined silence, around knowing when information becomes vulnerability, around understanding that disclosure is not transparency, it is exposure. But silence in civilian rooms often reads as guilt. My mother rose slightly from her seat and leaned toward me. Her whisper barely reached my ear. "Amelia," she said softly, urgently, "just say you were mistaken. Say it was exploratory. Say it wasn't formal. For us." For us. I did not look at her. The prosecutor continued, now addressing the court. "We have interviewed personnel from 3 divisions. No one has heard of Silent Sentinel. No directives, no operational briefings, no corroboration." He turned back to me. "Is it not true that you created this operation to cover financial discrepancies?" Financial discrepancies. Fraud, reframed politely. My father shifted in his seat. I could feel his discomfort more than see it. He valued reputation above accuracy. This spectacle would stain the family name. That was his concern. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Commander, if this operation exists, why is there no trace?" Because it was designed that way. Because it operated beyond conventional record systems. Because it required absence to function. None of those answers were permissible. The prosecutor's voice sharpened. "Why would you hide something legitimate, even from your own family?" The room quieted fully at that. The question was not procedural. It was psychological. It framed secrecy as deceit. It implied instability. It invited doubt. My mother's fingers tightened against the railing. "Please," she whispered, "this is getting worse. Just say it." She was calculating fallout, media attention, social circles, neighbors who would read headlines before context. She believed a small lie now would prevent a larger humiliation later. I understood her logic. It was incomplete. I stood very still. The prosecutor took my stillness as advantage. "Commander Vance, are you refusing to answer directly?" "I have answered," I said calmly. "It is classified." He spread his hands, inviting the courtroom into his exasperation. Convenient. A faint ripple of agreement moved through the gallery. I felt the shift, the subtle tilt of perception. Silence had crossed the line from discipline to suspicion. The judge's gaze sharpened. "Commander, this court does not operate on implication. If you cannot substantiate your claim, you leave us little room." Little room. In command, I had learned that pressure narrows perspective. People seek quick solutions when space feels tight. My mother leaned closer again. Her voice trembled now. "Amelia, think about your father. Think about what this will do to him, to all of us." I thought about Sunday dinners where my deployments were described as temporary distractions, about the polite discomfort when I declined to elaborate on my work, about the way my appointment to command had been received with a single question: is it permanent? They had never been comfortable with the parts of my life that did not belong to them. The prosecutor pressed again. "Is Silent Sentinel real, Commander?" "Yes," I said. "Then prove it." I met his eyes. "I cannot." There it was. Gasps, small but audible. My brother exhaled sharply behind me. The judge spoke carefully. "Why would you protect something at the expense of your own credibility?" "Because credibility can be rebuilt. Lives cannot." But that answer belonged elsewhere. The air in the courtroom felt thinner. The prosecutor lowered his voice slightly, shifting tactics. "Commander Vance, we are not asking for operational details. We are asking for confirmation that this is not a fabrication, a simple acknowledgement." Simple. There is nothing simple about confirmation. Confirmation validates structure. It reveals pathways. It narrows anonymity. One confirmation can unravel years. I felt the exact edge of the decision. If I denied it, the operation would dissolve under internal review. If I confirmed it improperly, it would be exposed. If I remained silent, I would be publicly diminished. My mother's final whisper reached me, almost breaking. "Say you made it up. Just this once." I drew one slow breath. Then I spoke a single word: Argent. Nothing else. The word did not appear in the prosecutor's filings. It was not referenced in testimony. It was not part of the accusation, but it existed. The shift was immediate. The prosecutor's expression changed. Briefly. A tightening at the jaw. A calculation. The judge's pen stopped mid-note. In the second row, 2 officers from my unit stiffened. Argent was not Silent Sentinel. Argent was the authorization channel attached to it, a restricted oversight conduit designed for operations that bypassed conventional logging systems. Mentioning it did not disclose details. It signaled verification. The judge leaned back slowly. "Counsel," he said to the prosecutor, "are you familiar with that designation?" A pause. "I am not aware of its relevance," the prosecutor replied. "Perhaps you should be," the judge answered evenly. The room had shifted from certainty to complication. My mother looked at me, confused now. The clean solution she wanted had evaporated. I did not elaborate. I did not explain. The judge called for a recess. The gavel struck once. Firm. As the courtroom emptied, whispers replaced accusation. I stepped into the corridor alone. My mother followed within seconds. "What did you just do?" she asked quietly. "I preserved operational integrity," I replied. She stared at me, searching for reassurance I did not provide. "This isn't about integrity," she said. "It's about survival." "It always is," I answered. By the end of the week, no apology was issued, no admission extracted. Instead, oversight inquiries began quietly through channels the prosecutor could not access without clearance he did not possess. My name remained debated in headlines. My reputation absorbed doubt, but Silent Sentinel continued, and those it protected never knew a courtroom had nearly undone it. Control is rarely loud. It is maintained in moments when surrender would be easier. Have you ever stood alone in a room where everyone expected you to yield? What did you choose? If this story stays with you, you're welcome to continue with me. Recess did not feel like relief. It felt like containment. The corridor outside the courtroom was narrow, lined with framed portraits of judges who had built careers on visible certainty. Their eyes followed nothing. Their expressions suggested order had always been intact. I stood near a window overlooking the courthouse steps. Reporters clustered below, contained by barriers. Microphones angled upward like metal flowers waiting for a name. Mine. Footsteps approached behind me. My father. He stopped close enough that I could feel his presence without turning. He cleared his throat the way he always did before addressing something unpleasant. "You blindsided us," he said quietly. I kept my eyes on the steps below. I answered the question I was asked. "You made it worse." "No," I replied. "I prevented something worse." He exhaled sharply. "This isn't the military. You don't win by withholding." In the glass reflection, I saw his expression. Controlled frustration, not panic, not yet. "You don't win in court by being mysterious," he added. "This isn't about winning," I said. He shifted beside me. "Then what is it about?" "Containment." He did not like that word. Behind him, my mother approached. Her composure had hardened into strategy. "They'll investigate that name," she said. "Whatever it is. If it's real, you've just invited scrutiny." "Yes. And if it isn't, it is." She lowered her voice. "Amelia, people don't recover from public doubt like this. You've worked too hard." Recovery is a civilian concept. In command, you operate through damage. The prosecutor exited the courtroom then, speaking quietly with an aide. He did not look at me. That told me enough. He had recognized the word. He had not expected it. The judge re-entered moments later. We were called back inside. The gallery had grown. News spreads faster in corridors than on record. I resumed my position at the table. The prosecutor's tone had shifted when he began again. Less theatrical, more careful. "Commander Vance," he said, "for the record, you referenced an oversight designation during recess." I did. "Are you asserting that this designation validates your claim?" "I am asserting nothing beyond its existence." He pressed his lips together briefly. "Is it connected to Silent Sentinel?" "Yes." "Explain the connection." "No." A ripple again. The judge intervened. "Commander, the court must understand whether this reference is substantive or evasive." "It is substantive," I said. "Then why not clarify?" "Because clarification would compromise operational security." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Your Honor, this is circular." "It is constrained," I corrected. His eyes sharpened. "You are asking this court to accept an invisible structure based on a single word." "No," I said. "I am informing the court that visibility is not the metric for legitimacy." The silence that followed felt different than before. He tried another angle. "Commander Vance, are you aware that invoking restricted terminology without authorization could itself constitute misconduct?" "Yes." "And yet you did so?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because measured risk is preferable to catastrophic exposure." Instead, I said, "because the alternative would have been false." The judge studied me for a long moment. "Counsel," he said to the prosecutor, "does the department have clearance to investigate the designation mentioned?" The prosecutor hesitated. "That would require additional authorization." "Then pursue it." A murmur moved through the room again. The prosecutor adjusted his stance. "Your Honor, requesting classified validation will delay proceedings." "Then we will delay." The gavel struck lightly. Control shifted. Not dramatically, but measurably. The prosecutor attempted one final maneuver. "Commander, are you aware that your refusal to provide documentation places your leadership appointment under review?" "Yes." "And does that concern you?" "No." That answer landed harder than the others. The room expected defensiveness. I gave none. He narrowed his eyes. "You are willing to sacrifice your own position?" "I am willing to accept consequences." "For what?" for discretion. He paused. The judge closed his folder. This court will recess pending inquiry into the designation provided. Proceedings are suspended until further notice. The gavel fell again. This time, the silence carried weight. As we stood, cameras flashed from the back of the room. Reporters surged toward the aisle. Questions collided in the air. "Commander, is the operation covert? Are funds missing? Is this political?" I did not answer. Security escorted me through a side exit. Outside, the sky was overcast, controlled light again, no shadows sharp enough to hide in. My mother caught up to me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I agreed. "You could still clarify." "I won't." Her eyes searched mine. "You're not protecting us." "I'm not meant to." The words landed between us. She stepped back as if I had pushed her. My father joined her. "This will follow you," he said. "Yes." "And if the inquiry finds nothing?" "It won't." He held my gaze, testing for doubt. I gave him none. A black government sedan waited at the curb. I did not look back as I entered it. Inside, the driver handed me a secured device without speaking. A single message blinked on the encrypted screen. "Designation acknowledged. Inquiry contained. Maintain position. No signature, no flourish, just confirmation." I leaned back against the seat. Outside, cameras still searched the courthouse doors for reaction. They would not get one. By evening, headlines shifted tone. From fabricated operation to classified review, doubt remained. But certainty had fractured. That was enough. When I returned to base that night, my executive officer met me in my office without knocking. "Sir," he said quietly, closing the door behind him, "we're receiving external queries." I expected that. "Do we respond?" "No." He nodded once. He understood. After he left, I stood alone in the office that still smelled faintly new. My nameplate had been mounted only weeks ago. Reputation is visible. Authority is not. Outside my window, personnel moved across the tarmac in steady rhythm. Work continued. Aircraft lifted and landed without regard for headlines. That is how operations survive scrutiny, through motion, not explanation. My phone vibrated once on the desk. My mother. I let it ring until it stopped. Some pressures are external. Others are inherited. Only one of them requires obedience. Have you ever chosen silence when speaking would have protected your image? What did you lose? If you want to continue, the next part will follow. The inquiry began without announcement. No formal notice. No dramatic summons. Just a message routed through secure channels at 0600. Oversight panel convened. Remote attendance required. I closed my office door and initiated the encrypted link. The screen flickered once, then resolved into a muted conference room somewhere far from this base. 6 individuals sat at a long table, faces neutral, folders closed. No introductions were necessary. "Commander Vance," the chair began, "you invoked Argent in open court." "Yes." "Why?" "Because the allegation required containment." A pause. "Containment of what?" "Exposure." The panel members exchanged brief glances. One made a note. "You understand," another said, "that Argent is not designed for defensive citation." "I do." "Then why risk drawing attention to it?" "Because the alternative was systemic review of Silent Sentinel's structure." Silence. Measured. Analytical. The chair leaned forward slightly. "You calculated that a controlled acknowledgement was safer than categorical denial." "Yes." "And safer than confirmation." "Yes." "Explain." "If I denied the operation, internal review mechanisms would initiate audit protocols. Audit protocols require documentation. Documentation exists only within compartmented channels. The court would then subpoena partial records. Partial records distort context. And confirmation? Confirmation without oversight reference would appear unilateral. That would invite executive inquiry. Another panel member spoke for the first time. So you chose to implicate Argent. I chose to signal legitimacy without operational disclosure. The room went quiet. Finally, the chair nodded once. The court has requested validation. I expected that. They will receive acknowledgement of designation existence. Nothing further. That is sufficient. A slight narrowing of eyes. You are aware your appointment remains provisional pending this outcome. Yes. Does that concern you? No. The faintest shift in posture around the table. You appear remarkably composed, Commander. Composure is structural. The line held. The chair closed the folder in front of him. Argent remains intact. Silent Sentinel remains intact. Public perception is not our jurisdiction. Understood. The call ended. The office returned to its usual quiet. Outside, maintenance crews moved across the runway in disciplined patterns. Motion without commentary. By midday, the prosecutor's office issued a statement. The court had received confirmation of a restricted oversight designation connected to the contested operation. Further review pending. The phrasing was careful, defensive. Doubt no longer centered on fabrication. It centered on secrecy. That was acceptable. At 1400, my executive officer entered again. Sir, media requests have shifted tone. How? They're asking why a commander would conceal operations from her own family. Of course they were. Civilian logic struggles with compartmentalization. Do not engage, I said. Yes, sir. After he left, I allowed myself exactly 30 seconds of stillness. My mother's voice replayed in memory. Why would you hide this even from your own family? Because clearance is not inheritance. Because blood does not equal access. Because command is not communal. That evening, I returned to my quarters rather than remain in the office. The base housing was quiet, predictable, ordered. My phone waited on the kitchen counter. 3 missed calls from my mother, 1 from my father, no messages. I sat at the table without turning on the lights. Pressure from the court had been procedural. Pressure from family was personal. The doorbell rang. I did not expect visitors. When I opened the door, my mother stood there. She had driven 3 hours. Her posture was rigid, her coat still buttoned. "May I come in?" she asked. "Yes." She stepped inside and looked around the small, precise space. Nothing excessive, nothing decorative. "You live like this?" she asked quietly. "Yes." She removed her gloves slowly. "I watched the news," she began. "They said the court confirmed something." "Yes." "So it's real." "Yes." She swallowed. "Why couldn't you just tell us?" "Because you are not cleared." "I'm your mother." "Yes." Her composure cracked slightly. "Do you think I would expose you?" "I think exposure is rarely intentional." She stared at me. "You've always done this," she said. "Built walls." "I built boundaries." She shook her head. "This is different." "No." "It is." She stepped closer. "Do you know what it feels like to sit in that courtroom and hear them call you a liar?" "Yes." "And not be able to defend you?" "You are not required to." Her hands tightened at her sides. "Family defends each other." "Family trusts each other," I replied. The words landed harder than intended. She looked at me as if measuring distance for the first time. "You don't trust us. I trust you to act from emotion." "That's not a crime." "No, but it is incompatible with classification." Silence stretched between us. "I asked you to say it wasn't real," she said finally. "I know." "You could have ended it." "Yes." "And you chose not to." "Yes." Her voice softened then, but not in surrender. "You chose strangers over us." I considered the phrasing. I chose structure over comfort. She closed her eyes briefly. "You don't bend," she said. "Not when bending breaks something else." Her shoulders lowered a fraction. "What happens now?" she asked. "The inquiry concludes. The headlines fade. The operation continues." "And us?" I held her gaze. That depends on whether you require access to remain present. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room again. You've changed, she said. No, I replied. You're seeing the parts that were always there. She moved toward the door without argument. At the threshold, she paused. I was afraid, she admitted quietly. Afraid you would lose everything. I might, I said. And you're not afraid? I am. She looked at me, startled. But fear is not directive. She nodded slowly. Then she left. The house returned to silence. I stood in the doorway until her car disappeared at the end of the road. Back inside, I turned on the kitchen light. The room looked unchanged, controlled, stable. Leadership is rarely about proving truth. It is about absorbing doubt without transferring risk. The following week, the court formally suspended the case pending classified review. No admission of wrongdoing, no exoneration, just procedural closure. My appointment was confirmed 2 days later, quietly. No ceremony. On the tarmac that afternoon, I watched a transport aircraft lift into a gray sky. Movement without applause. Integrity rarely restores reputation immediately. It restores alignment. Have you ever chosen alignment over approval? Did it cost you something permanent? If you want to continue, the next part will follow. The headlines faded in layers. First, the accusations disappeared from the front page. Then the speculation shifted to other names. Finally, my photograph stopped circulating beside words like alleged and fabricated. Nothing was cleared. Nothing was corrected. It simply moved on. That is how public doubt dissolves, not through apology, but through distraction. On base, nothing had changed. At 05:30, I walked the perimeter with the operations chief. The air was cold and carried the metallic scent of machinery warming to life. Personnel saluted. I returned it. Routine remained intact. Routine is stabilization. In the briefing room, screens displayed live feeds and flight paths. Silent Sentinel's framework operated exactly as designed. Distributed nodes, compartmented relays, absence by architecture. No trace visible externally. Inside, precision. My executive officer entered midway through the morning cycle. Sir, he said quietly, closing the door, there's been a request. From Internal Affairs. I looked up. Scope? They want to conduct a leadership climate assessment. Of course they did. When external accusations fail, systems often test internal cohesion. Authorize it, I said. He hesitated. You're certain? Yes. Scrutiny does not destabilize structure. It reveals weakness, if weakness exists. The assessment team arrived 2 days later. Civilian analysts in neutral suits, observant, unemotional. They interviewed my officers separately, reviewed internal communications, analyzed allocation logs. They would find nothing irregular, because nothing irregular existed. Still, observation changes atmosphere. I noticed the shift in posture during meetings, the extra care in phrasing, the instinct to over-explain. I did not adjust my tone. Control is demonstrated through consistency. On the 3rd day of review, I received a secure call. Argent liaison. Commander, the voice said, uninflected. External inquiry has been formally closed. Status? Validated, no further action. Understood. A pause. You exercised discretion. Yes. You also exercised risk. Yes. Be aware, the voice continued. Argent cannot be invoked twice. I won't need to. The line disconnected. I returned to the operations floor. The assessment team completed their review by the end of the week. The lead analyst requested a private conversation before departure. We sat across from each other in my office. Commander Vance, she began, your unit shows high structural integrity. Yes. However, she continued, there is an observable distance between you and your personnel. Define distance. They respect you, she said carefully. They do not approach you. That is appropriate. She studied me. Leadership models often encourage relational accessibility. I encourage operational reliability. She made a note. Some might interpret your reserve as detachment. Detachment preserves objectivity. Silence. Have you always led this way? She asked. Yes. Even before command? Yes. She closed her folder. There are no procedural concerns, she said finally, but perception shapes morale. Morale is shaped by stability and by trust. I do not require personal trust, I said. I require procedural trust. She stood then. Your position is secure, she said, but leadership evolves. Structure remains, I replied. After she left, I remained seated for several minutes. Distance. The word lingered. Later that evening, I walked alone along the far edge of the tarmac. Aircraft lights blinked against a darkening sky. Wind pressed against my uniform jacket. My phone vibrated once. A message from my brother. Mom says things are settling down. You could visit. I read it twice. Then I turned the screen off. 3 days later, I received a formal invitation. Not from family, from the court. A public statement would be issued acknowledging that the allegations lacked substantiation due to classified oversight confirmation. It would not call me innocent. It would not call me right. It would simply close the narrative. I did not attend. The statement was delivered without me. The language was neutral. No wrongdoing established. Insufficient grounds for further action. Ambiguity is often the cleanest resolution. That evening, my mother called again. I answered. They said it's over, she said quietly. It is. You didn't even go. No. Why? Because the operation mattered more than the optics. A long pause. I was wrong, she said finally. Yes. She inhaled sharply at the directness. I thought protecting the family meant minimizing damage. It meant minimizing exposure, I said, and you protected strangers instead. I protected responsibility. Silence. Will you ever tell us? She asked. No. She did not argue this time. Are you satisfied? She asked. Satisfaction is not a metric in command. I am aligned, I replied. Another pause. I don't always understand you, she said. That's not required. She exhaled slowly. Will you come for dinner Sunday? A simple question, no agenda layered beneath it. Yes, I said. When Sunday came, I drove home without uniform. The house looked unchanged. My father opened the door. He did not mention the court. He did not mention Argent. He stepped aside and said, "Dinner's ready." At the table, conversation remained ordinary. Weather, neighbors, repairs needed. No one asked about Silent Sentinel. No one asked about command. Halfway through the meal, my father looked at me briefly. "You handled it," he said. "Yes." He nodded once. No apology, no praise, just acknowledgement. It was enough. After dinner, my mother walked me to the door. "You didn't bend," she said. "No." "You didn't break either." "No." She touched my arm lightly. "I'm trying to learn the difference." I met her eyes. "It's quiet," I said. On the drive back to base, I considered the assessment analyst's words. Distance. Perhaps. But distance is not absence. It is boundary. At 600 the next morning, I stood again in the briefing room. Silent Sentinel's feeds glowed across the screens. Unseen, operational, intact. Public doubt had not altered its function. Family pressure had not redirected its course. Leadership is not about being understood. It is about remaining steady when misunderstanding is easier. Have you ever chosen steadiness over approval from those closest to you? Did they eventually see the boundary? If you'd like to continue, the next part will follow.